Morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's FERC Order 881 Managing Transmission Line Ratings Phase 2 Stakeholder Call. My name is Isabella Nicosia, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'll be facilitating the web conference today. I'm also joined on the line by Raja Tapatapula, our Director of Operations and Engineering Services, as well as Trisha Johnstone, our Director of Operational Readiness. Before we get started, I just have a couple housekeeping reminders that I wanted to go through. So this call is being recorded. The recording is for informational and convenience purposes only. So any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. Today's meeting is structured to stimulate dialogue and engage different perspectives. And while we always welcome comments and questions, just a reminder to please keep those professional and respectful. And then try and be brief and refrain from repeating what has already been said so that we can manage the time efficiently today. We do expect to have quite a bit of time to address any questions you may have, though. When it is time to ask a question, if you connected to audio through the computer or use the Call Me option on WebEx, you'll want to select the raise hand icon, which is located just to the right above the chat window. If you connected to audio outside of the WebEx, you'll need to press #2 to enter the queue. And just a reminder for everyone on the line to please start by introducing yourself and stating your organization so that everyone else on the phone knows who's speaking. And then if you need technical assistance during the meeting today, you can send a chat to the event producer. Our event producer's name is Silas. And then also during Q&A, you can send your question in the chat to either myself, again, my name is Isabella Nicosia, or you can send it to all panelists and we'll make sure to read it out to the group and get you a response. So the agenda for today, in just a moment, I'm going to hand it over to Raja for the initiative background and overview, and then we'll go into the implementation update. So we'll cover the FERC Order 881 ambient adjusted ratings and dynamic line ratings, and then go over some information about the various project tracks for this initiative. And then we'll wrap up today with some next steps. So this slide shows where we are at in the CAISO's policy initiative stakeholder process. This initiative is a bit different than our typical stakeholder process because in phase 1 we did do the compliance filing. So this phase 2 really focuses on implementing what was committed to in that compliance filing. So we are here under the implementation stage. So with that, I will hand it over to Raja and we'll kick things off.
Morning. I'm hoping you guys can hear me. This is Raja Tapitobla. So as Isabella said, right, this slide covers around the background of this 881, FERC Order 881 effort so far, what CAISO RC West has been doing so far. Right, little bit background, what this order means, right? It requires ambient adjusted ratings, AAR, or dynamic line ratings, right, DLR. Those are the short forms that are being used to be used in the evaluation or curtailment of near-term 10 days or less transmission service. On top of that, it also requires ISOs and RTOs to use AARs in the congestion management process and near-term commitment markets. What does that mean, right? So, but from both the market's point of view as well as reliability point of view, it requires ISOs, RTOs to use those AARs as they're available in those tools and make those decisions from both markets as well as real-time tools. So ISO filed a compliance filing on 7/12/2022, right? That's the required date that FERC set up. It's a full compliance is required by July 12th, 2025. So it means everything has to be implemented, right? The tools, the TOPs have to be ready. The TOPs are ready and sending the data to PDOs are sending the data to ISO RC West. And we are utilizing those data in our real-time congestion management process, real-time market process, day-ahead market process, day-ahead reliability studies process, and anything that is forward-looking, that is 10 days or less. So any of those processes were required by this order to use the ambient adjusted ratings. Well, so a little bit implementation after the background, right? What we have been doing, CAISO RC West has been doing for the past roughly 8 months. We create an internal team, right? The first thing we did is an internal project team that involves pretty much operations, planning, right? Technology, architecture. So we wanted to look into that more holistically and then come up with a plan how to be compliant with this order. So we developed multiple project tracks, which both me and Trisha are gonna talk about that in the next couple of slides. So we also started a public stakeholder process, right? We've been involved in multiple, right, RC front. We have been involved in data exchange working group as well as RC committees, as well as we're also a couple of us we're also involved with the industry implementation. What the industry is doing as well, right? We were at the NATF meetings, as well as some of the ISOs, RTOs in the East. We've been following what they're doing, right? So we have been having communication with them, what they're trying to do. So we just want to make sure we are implementing something similar what everybody's trying to do, right? Make sure that we're exchanging ideas. So that's what we have been doing so far. From a project proposal point of view, we created three different tracks internally to be compliant so that we know what we need to be doing in phases, right? What can be accomplished and how can we start utilizing these ratings in our processes as early as possible, right? Not just wait until July 12th, 2025. So the track one is the real-time reliability applications, right? This is in progress, targeted to be 2023, 2024. So I have a slide to talk more details, and Trisha will help me as well in that. If there's any questions, we can definitely take those questions when the next slide comes up. In a track two, this is more to determine the data formats, any operational EMS model data changes that we need, any templates that we need to develop, any tools that we need to develop, and that's the thing that we're looking at track two. And track three, we're looking into our market applications and look-ahead applications, right? Our day-ahead market, our look-ahead commitment process, right? How do we use those in our HASP, right? Those are the things that we want to start implementing in this track three. And obviously, that is target to be fall 2025. Thank you. So in the track one, right, the reliability real time, again, make sure that everybody understand what does that mean. It's strictly real-time processes, right? And we plan to receive this AAR or DLR data via ICCP, right? So this is for real-time applications, real-time RTCA, real-time EMS application processes, not the real-time market yet, right? So in this track one, we're strictly from a reliability point of view, get those data as available from the TOPs and PTOs and use them in our real-time EMS monitoring, real-time base case monitoring, and real-time contingency analysis process. So we anticipate this capability to be ready in 2023, but we are still working on developing a clear timelines and to work with the TOPs, and anybody that is ready, we can start working with them and get those data sometime in 2023. So we don't want to do everybody at once, right? We're going to do in phases, each work with different set of TOPs and get those data as it is available when we're ready. Trisha, do you want to add anything on this track one?
No, I think you got it, Rajat. We know that some entities are ready to go with this now, and so I think that'll be an item that we'll be looking for feedback on here in the near future. Is who's ready now versus who still needs to do some work on your side, to develop that capability, and in that way, we can kind of get everybody in line accordingly. So we there could be some entities that actually don't fully implement this until the 2025 deadline. It doesn't mean everybody's got to be in by end of year 2023. But that'll be part of those discussions and things where we'll need your feedback moving forward.
Thank you, Trisha. So to add additional things, right, in this track one, we expect to receive both normal rating, right, normal continuous ratings, as well as the emergency ratings, any AAR, DLR ratings that the TOPs can calculate, and then can send it to us through ICCP. We'll work with them through this phase, right? Again, there's different things that CAISO RC West can do, right? There's one normal rating and 4 different emergency ratings that we can gather and process in our systems and use this in our systems, right? What does that mean? 4 different emergency ratings, right? Based upon different TOPs have 4-hour rating, 3-hour, 2-hour, 1-hour, a 15-minute rating. So based upon the TOP, we can set it up in a way that works for that particular TOP, what they are able to calculate and receive those data and use this data in RTCA, right? And that is the track one process will work. In a track two, this is more, right, there's a couple of things that we have to do this year. This, as you guys are aware, the FERC Order 881 requires roughly 240 hours of hourly calculated ratings that we need to gather from each. So we want to develop a template, format, and tools that they can process this data. So that's where in the track two, we'll be coming up with a template that TOPs can work on. It doesn't matter what tool, we want to make sure that TOPs can send it to us and we can process that, right? As long as we're talking in similar format, like a same or different, anything, right? We'll communicate more once we have more details under this track two, once we have finalized the format, the tools that we want to develop. And also there's a couple of things that we had to do this from an RC point of view. We had to communicate with our external RCs as well and exchange ratings. So that's where we want to finalize a format that we can talk with neighboring RCs and especially on equipment that is on the seams. We had to exchange ratings on both and communicate there. So that's what we want to do on the track two. Tricia, do you want to add anything on track two?
Just for anyone that is currently in that participating transmission owner group in the CAISO BA, where you leverage the transmission register for the rating submission right now, that's another area where we're anticipating needing to enhance the interface, and then ideally what we would like to be able to do is extend that type of capability to the non-participating transmission owners as well. That we've got some architecture work to do in that space. We don't know if it's just going to be an expansion of the transmission register to a wider audience, or if it would be, a new application and new interface.
Thank you, Tricia. So one more thing on the track two as well is, right, it requires, the FERC 881 requires at least on the minimum, 4 seasonal ratings. On top of the ambient regis ratings, they also require to use seasonal ratings. Right now, there are some TOPs that use 2 ratings, some TOPs use 1 rating, some TOPs 3 or 4 seasons, right? But my CAISO definitely has that capability to use 4 different seasonal ratings in our system, in our EMS. So there's no changes needed on that. But the TOPs are not utilizing that, but with this 881, it requires us to use that. So we'll work with the TOPs, and each TOP can set it up how they want to do that, those seasonal ratings, and work with CAISO, RC West, and utilize that feature. So under the track two, we'll work with the TOPs and PTOs and implement that seasonal rating process. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in track three, the market applications and liquid applications, right? This is strictly from a Western EAM point of view. We have, right, real-time market. We have the EDAM is coming up. We have a day-ahead market right now that we use for CAISO BA, right? So as well as from an RC West point of view, we also run the day-ahead operation planning analysis, the next day reliability studies too. So those are things that we need to work, we need to develop internally. We need to make changes to those tools so that we can use the ratings that we're getting, the hourly rating that we're getting in those tools. Again, there's timelines associated with that, right? When can we use? When is the cutoff for day-ahead market? Whether it's 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. and right. So Andrew can help us. I know in the 881 filing we said we expect to receive the data by 9 a.m. Andrew, can you elaborate on that from a day-ahead market point of view?
Yeah, hi. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on which time zone you're in. This is Andrew Ulmer. I work with the ISO's legal department. Yeah, in the compliance filing we made back on July 12, 2022, and I definitely recommend it to stakeholders as a place to start, in addition, obviously, to the order. We proposed market timelines for both the day-ahead market, for utilizing ambient adjusted ratings in the day-ahead market and in the real-time market. And for the day-ahead time frame, we asked that we proposed that ratings be submitted no later than 9 a.m. for use in the day-ahead market. And then in the real-time market, we proposed, I think, 5 hours out to align with our short-term unit commitment processes.
Thank you, Andrew. So there's additional reporting requirements as well, right? I think it requires us to save 5 years worth of data, the 5 years worth of ratings that are coming in. It also requires all the TOPs, PDOs, transmission rating methodologies, right? If they're publicly available sites. So we need to collect on those rating methodologies and save it in some kind of location. It's an OASIS, right? So I mean, it can be used, OASIS can be used for that. So we'll still haven't finalized exactly what that storage location will be, but once we have more details, we'll definitely work on that in track 3 and share with you guys. That's at least anything else. And there's also, right, from a 10 days transmission service. Right now, CAISO doesn't sell transmission service, but we have a process that we're working on to implementing that transmission scheduling priority service, right? Once we have more details on that, we'll definitely utilize part of that process. We'll definitely utilize those ratings that come in from 10 days or less. Thank you. Next slide. So it looks like there's a question. Maybe let's take a break and maybe look at the chat questions. Are there any questions that people has? Maybe we can utilize this time to talk through before we go into the next set of slides.
Yeah, so we do have a question in the chat. For track 3, do you also anticipate EIM entities to provide 10-day limits on their ETSRs?
That's a good point. Yep, definitely that is the thought process, and the track 3 will work on any changes to the ETSR process as well. Trisha, do you want to add on?
No, I think it'll be questions like that. I think that'll be really important in helping us shape what we're doing in track 3. I will say this will probably be the most challenging of the 3 tracks because track 1 we already have the architecture in place to handle. Track 2, same thing. We're kind of building on existing architecture. This is a new process. We don't currently receive transmission ratings, or at least a large volume of transmission ratings in this time frame for use for this purpose. So I think we definitely want to note that as for kind of consideration, but it would make sense that we would have the ETSRs in that time frame.
Thank you, Trisha. Isabella, do you want to take any questions from people on the phone?
Yeah, let's give it a moment and see if anyone enters the queue. Again, if you have a question, you can raise your hand using the raise hand icon located above the chat window. And if you dialed into the conference outside of WebEx, you'll need to press #2. So Silas, will you let us know if anyone enters the queue?
Absolutely. It looks like there's no hands up in the queue at this time.
Okay, I did see another chat pop up. Any thoughts on how this will affect the day-ahead HA markets?
Yeah, I can add, the day-ahead market, right? Definitely it's next 24 hours. Definitely part of this order 881, we're required to collect 240 hours of ambient register rating as long as the TOPs are able to calculate and they have reason that they need to calculate these ratings on. There's some exception process, right? If the TOPs decide they don't need to calculate, there's an exception process that can be developed, and those equipment, we can collect that information and save it so that everybody can see it, that there's no need to calculate rating on those equipment. But any equipment that we calculate part of this 240 hours, right, we expect to receive the data and use that in our day-ahead market. For the 24 hours, if there's any ambient adjusted rating on top of seasonal rating, we'll definitely use that ambient adjusted rating that is coming in. Again, before the cutoff, right? There's, 9 a.m. cutoff that we mentioned in our tariff filing. Andrew can correct me, right? If through this process we decide that the timing can be changed, we can definitely refile at FERC and get the timing changed. It's not a hard-coded date. It is the initial compliance filing that we did. But once we expect before that anything that comes in before that time, we can definitely use that in our next day market, day-ahead market, as well as next day OPA process as well.
Yeah, just to echo Raja's comment, I mean, the compliance filing we made was structure for implementation of Order 881 requirements. We said this in our compliance filing that there's a lot of thinking and work that cuts across a lot of the ISOs, business practices and business units. There's a lot of thinking and work that cuts across our participating transmission owners, business units, and their business practices, as well as entities that are participating in the Western Energy Imbalance Market, as well as our C customers, all of which gets touched to some degree by this order. So as this process goes forward, as we identify implementation issues, there may be the need to return to our tariff language that we filed with FERC to make some clarifications. So that's something that we're conscious of and we'll continue to think about.
Thank you, Andrew. On top of that, hour rate markets, right? I think we, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong. We filed that at least we required data 5 hours before the real-time hour. So anything that comes in 5 hours before, we'll definitely utilize in those hour-head market, HASP, and the real-time 15-minute markets as well, and the real-time market as well. I think there's another question that I see.
And can I just add on one more thing real quick about the day ahead, hour ahead? So one of the base assumptions kind of our internal team had talked about, so we don't kind of drive ourselves crazy with unnecessary complexity, is we are starting with some base assumptions, like those processes are already following a certain cadence, right? And we're not looking necessarily to change those processes, like the nuts and bolts of those processes, right? So we're really looking to see how this data could be brought in accordance with those timeframes, so it can be leveraged in those existing processes for both day ahead and for hour ahead. We kind of touched on the topic of whether we would need to eventually get down to like 15-minute granularity or something like that, and we're not anticipating that at this stage. That's something we could always consider in the future, should there be a need. But I wanted to hand off to Danny Johnson because we will have some market policy initiative work starting as well.
Yeah, thanks, Tricia. So it's not finalized yet, but I think the ISO is planning through a roadmap process to next fall have a market policy initiative that figures out how these ratings would be utilized between our day-ahead market, obviously, and then implemented in the real-time market with all of the sequential market runs that we have. We want to kind of holistically consider how this impacts our real-time price formation specifically and other real-time products like FRP. So please look forward to, I think, next fall or late 2023, jumping into how this will actually be integrated into the CAISO's market systems.
Thank you, Danny. Yeah, this looks like there's another question. Looks like, if I'm understanding this correctly, does 881 apply to all BS facilities, right? Does CAISO plan on encouraging everyone to apply 881 to all facilities? I think, Andrew can correct me as well. This is, I'm understanding correctly, right? The 881, it requires all BS facilities that are impacted by ambient adjusted ratings, right? Not every equipment will be impacted by changes to the ambient adjusted ratings. So any equipment that will be impacted by day and night differences between solar heating and ambient adjusted ratings will need to be calculated as part of this AR process. I know there's an exception that needs to be developed. There's reasons that that equipment doesn't get impacted by AR, any ambient adjusted ratings. Then definitely we need to document that. But other than that, any equipment that will be impacted will need to be calculated.
Yeah, and one of the elements of Order 881 in terms of its implementation in RTO or ISO regions is that it directed the RTO or ISO to work with its participating transmission owners to see if it can help facilitate consistency across the transmission line rating methodologies that transmission owners have. But to be unequivocal and clear, it is the transmission owner that will be responsible for establishing those rating methodologies and for submitting the ratings to the ISO, not the ISO. And then obviously, individual transmission providers in the Western Interconnection that are participating in the real-time market with the ISO, they have their own processes to implement Order 881. I think our connection there is ensuring that we're very clear about how we would incorporate that rating in the market processes, and then if an entity is an RC customer, obviously how we're incorporating rating information into our reliability applications.
Thank you. So it's like there's another question about CAISO plan to archive the AR data for post-market operations such as settlements, etc. You know, Andrew, Tricia, correct me if I'm wrong. You know, the order requires us to save the data for 5 years once the data that we get in. So we'll definitely plan archiving that. Other than that, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm understand. If I don't know if there's any subsequent question to that, right? We definitely plan to archive. Required by the 881 to archive.
Yeah, the data retention period is 5 years. That's correct. So we would be maintaining that data in the database we build, which would be accessible for those that have a legitimate reason to access it, but generally accessible to almost anybody.
I think one thing we could, I know subsequent slides will talk more about collaboration between ISO, RC West with the TOPs and PTOs, right? More on the development process. We could also talk about, I know it's a requirement for TOPs as well to save this data, so we can all agree on whether this is one location or each TOP has to save. So those are things that we still need to work through and agree on. Right? Does everybody needs to save it, or this ISO is the one that can save it and be available for everybody? So those are things that we need to discuss. Thank you. If there's no further questions, I think we can move into the next set of slides. Thank you. Right, just want to reiterate one of the things that we want to clarify is also make sure that everybody's on the same page with respect to, I know Andrew mentioned kind of alluded to that, right? We expect the TOPs and PTOs calculate those ratings and provide us the actual adjusted rating, hourly adjusted rating to us for each of those 240 hours, right? We don't expect ISO RC West doesn't expect to calculate those ratings, right? We have said we're not doing it, right? We expect everybody to submit the actual rating. I know some ISOs, their lookup tables are developing lookup tables, but from an ISO RC West point of view, we have decided we're gonna have the TOPs and PTOs calculate those ratings and provide the ratings to us. From a real-time point of view, we are planning to use the ICCP to receive those AR in real time, right? Again, ICCP will be used for real-time communications. As I said, normal rating, 4 emergency ratings, those are things that we'll be communicating using the AR, and we receive the data and utilize in our real-time process. We will not be utilizing ICCP to acquire the forecasted AR. What does that mean, right? It says 240 hours of forecast rating. So we're not gonna use ICCP. Just make sure everybody understand, right? We're not gonna use that structure. We'll be developing a new process under the track 2s, right? Track 2 and track 3. We're going to develop new process, and we will communicate once we understand the template, once we understand formats, whatnot. We'll definitely communicate with everybody before we start developing the tools. So you have time to develop your tools to provide the ratings to us in that format. That's a new process, not through the ICCP. We also expect AR limits, right? If somebody's doing an MVA, somebody's doing an AMP, right? To be consistent with what they're doing, right? If the seasonal limits are set up as an MVA, we expect the ratings come in, AR ratings come in MVA. If somebody set up as an AMP, we expect them to get those in AMP. So those are things that we're gonna plan to develop a white paper. And once we finish the white paper, we'll definitely share with the stakeholders. So just make sure that everybody is on the same page. This is also with thinking of from an RC West point of view, we're thinking of creating a forum where TOPs can discuss, right, how each company is contemplating to implement this AR calculations, just sharing ideas so that everybody's not thinking different ways, right? Maybe we can share, collaborate ideas and come up with solutions that work for everybody rather than putting everybody's time. So that's what we're thinking. So definitely as we set it up, we'll definitely share with you guys and collaborate with you folks. We'll take a break and request feedback, any questions about this so far?
Again, to raise your hand, you can press the raise hand icon located above the chat window. You can also put your question in the chat.
And also, while we're waiting to see if questions come in, probably one other thing to add on related to this is that, you know, if we decide during the course of things that for model AAR data that we have season, temperature tables and things like that associated with seasonal ratings. That would strictly be for validation purposes only. One of the principles we had determined is, these aren't our ratings. These are, the transmission owner and operator ratings. So we don't want to be in the position where we're having to calculate the ratings on our side and then potentially end up with a difference from what the owner is actually using. So if you do use temperature tables for calculations on your side, we would expect you to be, like on the ICCP values, to be just submitting the associated values, right, that are in our specification, but that we wouldn't be doing the associated calculation on our side. The tables on our side are only for validation purposes.
I did see a question come through the chat. For real-time AAR through ICCP, on the CAISO side, is it clear what format the TOP should use to send readings to the ISO?
It is, okay, go ahead, Kishan.
Yeah, I was going to say, so we do actually have a template right now. We're working on a pilot project with one entity, and I believe we'll have a kind of a draft template and specification that we would be able to put out soon. So our developer that's working on that pilot, he's on vacation right now, and we want to make sure that we've all got kind of agreement that it's good to post, but I do believe we're very close to that right now.
Yep. Yeah, one idea, I think what we are planning to work on the white paper, we definitely can add as the format into the white paper too, once we have more details, right?
And then a question on if the ISO has a schedule for when the white paper will be published, and will it be transitioned to a standard for all TOs?
It's a really good question. At least next couple of months, but about a standard, I think we're definitely, yeah, we want to, right? I think that's one thing we like to receive one format, but there's always the exceptions that's always this industry, right? The small entities that cannot do that. So, but we plan to have one format that we expect everybody to use, right? But there's always exceptions that we need to work through it. So hopefully that answers that question.
But, and I believe in an upcoming slide here, we do have a timeline for the white paper, I think, where we're targeting completion on that. And then I saw another question in the chat on sharing the pilot template before it's finalized. Definitely. So that's one of those things that we would definitely want to circulate a draft and get comments and make sure that we haven't missed something in that template before we finalize.
All right, do we have any other questions before we move on to next steps?
Yeah, I think, would you please also share the timeline? I think we can go to the next slide. That will help us talk about the timelines too. Yeah, this slide, this is an example. Just wanted, it was interesting how some of our Eastern counterparts are working on different things that they can use to calculate this 240 hours. Different examples, right? This is just a couple of examples that we wanted to share. Once we create the forum, right, we want to learn from those, what we are learning from what different entities are doing. We want to share that so that you folks in West can, RC West and EAM can actually see those too, and maybe something that can be utilized for your process as well. One example is, right, I've seen one entity in the East is doing this 240 hours forecast from each airport. There's a small entity, so there are different 5 airports that they have. They're trying to collect all that 5 airports information, weather information for each of those 240 hours, and actually develop the tool internally. They're not using vendor. They're writing a program internally, get those ratings, get those temperatures, and calculate the max temperature of all those, right? And they have a adjusted rating manager in their system, and they're calculating ratings and providing the rating to the whoever that they need to provide. So that's just one example. There's another small entity utilizing the weather data from, right, publicly weather provided in a 2.5 kilometer grid, right? These are small systems, but again, different solutions for different TOPs. So we'll share, as we learn more, definitely we plan to share with you folks so it can spur your thought process too. I'm sure if there's, if somebody had already thought through this, and if somebody's working on a pilots internally, if somebody wants to share, well, definitely this might, right now we could be Do you have audio, Isabella, from anybody wants to share? Could we enable that, or maybe we don't need to do that if we cannot do that.
Yeah, if anyone would like to enter the verbal queue, again, just press the raise hand icon located above the chat window. I haven't seen anyone utilize it yet. We're mostly getting chat questions.
Good, but once we create the forum, right, we can definitely have more open collaboration between everybody so that people can share, learn from each other. But a lot of interesting work going on across the industry, and we're all on this same boat, right? So we'll definitely share more information with you. Yeah, Trisha, you want to talk about this next steps? Yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah, so this is a tentative timeline, but we are targeting having that white paper done here in the next couple of months, at least in draft, and as well as some of these draft templates and things, and then have a better idea on the project timeline. So one of the things we're trying to be cognizant of here is we have a lot of work in progress on other projects, as well as you have a lot in queue already, and so we don't want to overcommit to the delivery on the software pieces in particular, and until we've been able to really shake out the requirements and ensure that our developers and our vendors and everybody have the bandwidth to make these dates. And so right now we're working with our program office to confirm if we've got the resources to help us through that business requirement development process, so we can have that finished in the first part of the year. In parallel, we would be working on our IRO 10 and TOP3 draft data specifications, and would have those posted and available for commenting for both CAISO BA and the RC West customers. And then for the track 1 data submission templates, I do think you'll get an early preview of those in the white paper, but I think this for the Q3 would be the finalized, and then any associated training. The track 1 data submission and testing, for those entities who are ready to go, if we're moving along well through things, we actually could start those activities earlier than the Q4, but like I said, it's flexible right now. But this is what we're targeting. So I think we will definitely be looking for feedback to see, who is far enough along in their processes that they would like to be one of the early candidates in any pilot and testing activities.
Thanks, Trisha. And it looks like we have one caller in queue. So let's go ahead and unmute Nolan.
Hey, all. Nolan Keller from SC. I'm kind of project managing the FERC 881 effort for the time being, but wanted to give some insight into kind of what we're thinking about here and how we're thinking about pursuing this. We were going to wait for a lot of the communication standards to be provided by the CAISO, and so while that was developed in tandem, we were doing a parallel path of developing an internal prototype of what this FERC 881 ambient adjusted ratings would look like on our lines, starting on lines and then moving to substations. But we really want to replicate what the transmission registry is telling us. We're going to use that as a template. As we develop what our ratings are on the back end, our eventual goal is to have something very similar to the structure of the transmission registry, and either an internal database for use of communication for a real-time, or not real-time, but day-ahead and 10-day forecasting markets. And so what that looks like for us, it's going to be, I would envision it's going to be in our internal systems. But again, this is very, very preliminary, but ultimately our goal is to use, what our meteorological data is telling us from wildfire and our wildfire groups, and plugging that into the ambient adjusted ratings calculations. And then right now we're running through some of our first pass calculations and working through some of the potential impacts from what we expect to see from some of those planning scenarios. So that's kind of our current.
Thank you, Nolan. So if I'm assuming correctly, you're coding that developing internally, right? That's good. So
yeah,
the whole calculation.
Using, I think we're going to utilize lookup tables for what our lines are to generate those, but ultimately the end result will end up in something similar to the existing transmission registry.
Thank you, Nolan. Are you guys planning to put any margin, Nolan, into that? Some kind of margin to say what temperature the rating will calculate, right? Not every degree we don't need to calculate, but is it 5 degrees or 10 degrees? What are you planning to put a margin on?
At the moment, I believe it's 5-degree increments, but yeah, that we might consider getting more granular, but I think 5 degrees has been about as precise as we've wanted to get so far for the hour long increments. I think 5 degrees is probably a conservative number for the time being, but we can continue on that. So we're open to about continued talks on that.
Thank you. Yep, definitely. I think those are things that we want to utilize the forum to share, right? Different ideas, what they're doing, and help us, everybody develop, right? I mean, there's different ways of getting this weather information too. So is there any publicly available information that everybody can use, right? That will be ideal. Yeah. Thank you. Looks like there are a couple of questions on the chat window as well. Maybe we can go through.
Yeah, so we have a question from Danielle Smith. What does the ISO expect from entities that are not required to comply with FERC 881 and how the CAISO will address the AAR of non-jurisdictional entities? So Andrew, did you want to address that one?
Yeah, I can try. So I guess our expectation is that we're going to make our reliability applications, our market applications available for the submission of transmission line ratings, ambient adjusted ratings. For entities that are non-jurisdictional for FERC, I mean, we're not imposing a requirement. In fact, as Tricia, I think, said, we're holding firm that the rating needs to be established by the top and not by the ISO, not calculated by the ISO. I would say that entities that are non-jurisdictional probably do want to look at FERC Order 881 and what expectations FERC has with respect to reciprocity for open access transmission tariffs. But again, we would be setting up the platform to receive these ratings. And obviously, if there's an exception process, I think as Raj has suggested, for some lines, those lines will likely have some kind of seasonal rating that would be the default that we would utilize. And so we would continue with that approach. Does that help, Danielle? Hopefully it does.
Yeah, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, right? It's at least the FERC 881 directly says any BES, right, that can be calculated that will be impacted by ambient adjusted rating, right? Temperature changes, day-night changes will need to be calculated. So it doesn't talk about jurisdictional aspects of it, but it only strictly talks about BES equipment. Obviously, BES equipment there, from a NERC point of view, there's an exception list, right? Any BES equipment that is not BES that should not be monitored by RC. There's an exception list that NERC has, and we can, right? And obviously those need to be documented, as you mentioned, right? Any exceptions that AARs doesn't need to be calculated. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's largely right. And what FERC has done is, and folks can obviously read the order so for themselves, but what FERC has done is has couched its directives to require the implementation of ambient adjusted ratings and for ISO's RTOs to set up platforms for incorporating dynamic line ratings on the theory that without these rating adjustments that jurisdictional rates are not just and reasonable in our markets. So the force and effect of a lot of our compliance filing relates to that, those market processes, but we're obviously aware that there are knock-on and cascading impacts on our reliability applications and in the reliability coordinator services we offer, as well as the congestion management services we're offering through the market processes.
Yeah, and I would also probably add that for entities who are on the seams with California ISO, where we're already needing to coordinate on the ratings at the tie line facilities, you'll certainly want to be aware of those impacts, right? I mean, we're already doing coordination with all of our neighbors seasonally anyway on those rating changes, but if those ratings are changing kind of more often, I think our neighbors are going to want to be tuned in with how those might be adjusting it and making sure that the adjacent TOPs are aligned with which rating is in effect in those advanced timeframes, as well as being monitored in real time, right? So
I think that's correct.
Yeah, there's looks like there's a couple of questions on the chat, and there's one question related to the timeline, short timelines involved with the ICCP, right? I mean, again, the short timelines, it's not a short in the sense, right? The order requires by compliant by July 12th, 2025. So we have the format, we have the tools developed in 2023, we receive the data real-time price CP, but we are not expecting everybody start utilizing that day one, right? So in phases, we'll work with you guys, and again, everybody has to be compliant by July 12th, 2025. If you are not ready on 2024, but again, you got to be ready by 2025 and provide the data to ISO, if I'm, at least from an order point of view. So that
Yeah.
should cover that. I think looks like there's some more questions.
Yeah, there's one more. There's a lot of discussion at NETF on discrepancy resolution. Has the ISO thought about how the resolution of discrepancies will be handled across tie lines, both within the BA and external to the KISO BA?
Yep, good point. Really good question. Definitely, we are thinking through that, right? From a discrepancies point of view, right? If the rating coming in is abnormal, right? We're planning to have some exception. I mean, some internal checking validation process. As Trisha alluded to that, right? Can we utilize that temperature tables at our shop and actually perform some more validations to make sure that we are getting the right rating? So those things that we're looking in, but we don't have all the details. On top of the tie lines, definitely we have a couple of different ideas that different entities are doing for tie lines with the neighboring RCs. Maybe there's a rating clearing house, right? So we are thinking through that. As we have more details, we'll definitely share more details on that. But really good question on that.
Yeah, I would add that that's an area, if you have best practices today on how you coordinate with some of the neighboring areas, those or you hear things through NETF or other forums, those would definitely be good things to bring to the forefront of the discussions here, because I know today the coordination occurs, but it's definitely challenging, and we do it on a seasonal basis, but we do always have that question, sometimes when we're doing the studies or when it comes down to real time, to make sure that everybody's on board using the same rating. So we definitely, I think, have an opportunity for improvement there, right? To make sure that the current monitored rating is very well known, so all the impacted parties have it.
One entity in East has a really good idea about this, that they thinking through that the kind of idea they're trying to create a rating clearing house tool, kind of collect all this information from all these different TOPs and determine what is the lowest rating, and once you clear the rating, send it to all the TOPs back. So there's two-way communication happening, so that's really good idea. So we are communicating with those entities as well. And as we have more details, what we need to do, we'll definitely share. But really, really good question, though. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. I'll give it just a moment. Oh, looks like Leon Wong has a question.
Is it on the chat as well? I don't see that question.
No, Leon, I think your line has been unmuted. You want to go ahead?
Hello, I'm audible now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Oh, okay, yeah. So it's not like a question, more like a comment towards the timeline here. So especially for track 1, data submission templates posted, and then data submission plus testing. So yeah, the guideline, if it's posted in Q3 2023, and then 1 quarter later, we needed to do the data submit and the testing, feeling like it's very tight. Reason being right now, we are not very clear that our existing EMS software has the capability to support the template or not.
Yeah, Leon, I can help you with this. I think Raja mentioned this before. So that would really be when we're starting the activity, right? So in the IRO 10 specification or the TOP3 specification, the deadline on this would probably be like the July 2025. So I think there will be some entities who are already prepared to do this. I don't expect that the specification would have something crazy, you know, in the template. And so the entities who are ready sooner and are able to start piloting and testing and things sooner, we'll get them lined up first, because you know, if everybody showed up at the door at the same time, we couldn't handle the volume, right? If everybody was ready at Q4, and I think some will continue to work on getting ready through 2024, but everybody be in compliance by July 2025.
Yeah, that's right. So the major concern here is after like TOP is clear about the format of the data we need to submit to CAISO. And then for TOP, we need a, assume software has the capability to support that. And then the next step is do the model to the SCCP data. And doing the modeling part gonna also take time there. So which means like 1 quarter's time is really tight in my view. That's my comment.
Yeah, no, I totally understood. You're right. There's a lot of detail behind that track 1 data submission and testing. So that is really just like a start. That's the starting line, right? But yeah, we would absolutely need to build out, you know, for each customer, you know, okay, great, your software is ready by this date, so that let's get your data in for, you know, DB, whatever, you know, number it is there in 2024. So then that way we can get to the testing and so on and so forth. So yeah, no, trust me, we wouldn't want you to rush to try and get it all done in 1 quarter.
Yeah, Lee, if I may add, right, some of this can be done before the actual software is ready too, right? The SCADA holders, right? For us, we need to receive the data, so we can create the SCADA holders. So I mean, that model can be done before your software is ready, right? The names that the points will be utilized, the point names and everything. So once we have that set it up on the model upload process, model implementation process, then when your software is ready, you can actually send the data. So it can be, it doesn't need to be worked through in series, right? In series, it can be worked before you guys are ready to. So again, I think once the format is known, right, we're not planning to change the format, so you can literally start developing the format right away rather than waiting until everything is ready on our side. So the template, right? The template is ready. We can actually receive the data. So we'll as part of the white paper, we'll make sure that the documented and it is available for you folks. So you can start planning your side, how you're gonna send the data utilizing the format, right? So those are things that can be worked before the Q3 2023.
Thank you.
We have a question in the chat asking if we can get more details on the requirement related to track 1, if possible.
Yeah, Trisha can help correct me too, right? As part of the white paper, if you get the format, that's the major portion of the track 1. The format is how we are going to receive the data, right? So everything that we are working on, you guys don't need to wait until our tools are ready. As long as we agree on format, you can start developing that. So the format will be part of the white paper, and we'll definitely share in the next 2 months. So yeah, and we can have more discussions once the format is shared.
Yes, yeah. Our developer has been working through a pilot with one company, you know, confirming that's all in order. So we do have a draft of it, but yeah, we'll have more details here coming soon in January.
Do we have any more questions? Silas, any questions on the phone line?
No questions on the phone line. It looks like Leon put his hand back up on WebEx.
Okay, go to Leon. Leon, you may be muted on your device. Okay, well, Leon, if you're having audio issues, you can definitely send your question through the chat or follow up with us through an email. I did see one more chat pop up. If AARs or seasonal ratings drive capital projects, does the ISO have a plan to handle these separately, or would these projects follow the normal TPP process?
We had a discussion with the planning. It follows the normal TPP process, right? There's an established process that goes through requirements, right? Is the reliability needs, economic needs, those will be dealt under that process. There's no separate process, at least as far as right now, it's not envisioned.
Thanks, Raja. Any other questions? Okay, not seeing any, so I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide here. So the ISO will hold stakeholder calls to provide progress updates on these different project tracks and answer any questions that we receive from stakeholders. So these will be in addition to the calls that we have to discuss the white paper and different publications. But we are seeking feedback from stakeholders on how frequent these calls should be from your perspective. We will have a comment template available to you by the end of the week for you to provide feedback on today's stakeholder call discussion and also include any questions you may have on the different tracks or any feedback you have. And that template will be available to you until January 11th. And it will be available on the initiative page linked here on this slide. And then after the deadline, we really want to welcome stakeholder feedback and questions throughout this process. So you can submit additional comments or questions related to the implementation of FERC Order 881 to be considered in future calls to ISO stakeholder affairs at kaiso.com. But that is our last slide today. So I'll just pause here to see if we have any last questions before we conclude, and also turn it over to Raja and Trisha if they have anything they'd like to add before wrapping up.
No, I think I'm waiting for once we set up the forum. I'd like to have definitely would like to have more open discussion so that more collaboration for us to discuss, and we'll discuss the format that we have. We'll discuss different ideas that other entities are sharing so that everybody can see it and learn from that and implement their process. So at least that's what the FERC order requires us. We're all in the same boat, right? We'll definitely work through this and try to be compliant by July 12th, 2025.
All right. Well, that concludes today's stakeholder call. Thank you all for joining us and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.